Hello everyone. Good morning. I am Euridiana Silva, and I feel so sorry cannot to be with you. And I really appreciate the opportunity and effort to participate by video in this panel. And thanks Stacy for the invitation. Thank you Alexandra, Anita, Scott, and Carlos for all the discussion presented. And thank you, Patrick, for facilitating my participation. Well, I'm here to present some reflections about the difference between teacher and educator and how conceptions, assumption could shape professional identity in music educating. Let's view a general abstract. The expression music education subsumes diverse conceptions and approaches starting from our experience and cultural contexts. It's a vast subject area through which teaching learning processes are built and analyzed in different contexts throughout life and in the professional training in music. The musician as a teacher are relevant subjects of this area. Studies on music as a profession point to teaching as one of the main work activities for musicians, training as music teachers or not. Well, here it's important to notice that I don't want reduce the comprehension of music education to the teaching of music, but the work in teaching market is an important part in the professional careers in music. To reflect on this theme, I take as the base the nominalist philosophical aspect, which emphasizes the weight of concepts in their action on the awareness and construction of identities as a result of contingent identification, as pointed Hall, Dubar, Danielewicz. Well, in the process of building professional identities in music education, I emphasize the verbs to identify and to assume. Identifying oneself as something presupposes the use of concepts, which are direct mediations of the language as discourse. Taking this identification consciously demands a broader understanding of these concepts as social-cultural linguistic construction. So, I start with three main issues to guide this presentation. How do musicians assume and identify themselves while professionals who work in education? How mediations of language shape professional identities. Is there a difference between being a music teacher and a music educator? This presentation results of my PhD dissertation, and my main theme were the construction of professional identities of musicians that work in education. So my study object were graduates in music performance that actually work in education teaching, and I realized interviews and questionnaires with 42 subjects from 4 universities in the southeast of Brazil. Just to illustrate, here is the Brazil map and the southeast region. This region is composed by the states of São Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, Minas Gerais, and Espírito Santo. This research is based on the critical conception of teaching and education presented by Paulo Freire in his work, and the understanding of music education as a culture. I know this can be a little risky. Are not music teacher and music educator the same thing? Synonymous? Well, there are a lot of difference between the language and English and Brazilian Portuguese. And I need to emphasize that all my arguments are based on Latin etymology of some words. And educação, that means education, and ensino, that means teaching. And how this concept are socially constructed and understand in the daily experience? Well, through the knowledge of experience. Uh, this knowledge is different from scientific knowledge or from informative knowledge. This knowledge of experience can be understood as how you get in the way and how you respond to what happens to you throughout your life and how it's going to shape you are, what you are. Well, this is considered a particular knowledge because each subject experience an all experience. So this knowledge uh, is woven in the elaboration and confrontation of the self and the other. And it's a kind of knowledge that drinking in different sources, formal, informal, or non-formal education, and in the professional socialization, among others. And it become a fundamental part of lifelong learning process. Well, this is a process by which the professional identities are forming, deforming, and reforming daily. Well, I will conduct this discussion starting with a philosophical provocation of a Portuguese authoress. The teacher is an educator. What does that mean? That every teacher is, whether lying or not, an educator. That the teacher should be an educator. But if ever teach is, should be an educator, should ever educator be a teacher? In other words, where does the essential difference between the teacher and the educator pass? What relationships should the teacher establish between his or her teaching activity and their participation in the educational process? The profession of teacher is historically constituted, relating not only to the environment of the regular school, but also tracing many of the relations in which there is some transmission of knowledge, as pointed Antonio Nova. But what is an educator? What differentiates teachers from educators? Uh, Being an educator does not constitute a recognized professional status or occupation here in Brazil. However, this is how many professionals declare themselves. I put these issues believing that self-definition is crucial in the process of developing professional identities, as pointed John Bennett. Well, in the Latin origin of the term to teach, in Latin, insinare, it means to put in sign. It belongs to the family of teaching words such as mark, designated, consigning, mean. Well, according to Olga Pombo, to teach is to choose the necessary words, those that make possible a distinction, is to find the distinctive mark, the sign, the insignia of one idea. Well, to teach is to make known by the word, to illuminate so that the other sees, to give sight. Well, in the course of the formative process, this putting a sign seems to be approaching to the transmission of contents and techniques, of information transmitted from who knows to who don't know. a practice that moves from the outside in. Well, teaching approach methods and how to do and how to transmit. Teaching was taken as what a teacher does. Educating, however, takes another meaning. Well, from Latin, educare, which is a derivative from educere, it contains the idea of conducting. From the same root, they are born to produce, to seduce, to deduce, to induce, to translate, and other words. Starting from this conception of conducting, Paulo Freire valued the term education in detriment to teaching. As he pointed, being educable is an intrinsically human condition, and it due to the fact that we are unfinished beings, and that is, we are in constant formation. Well, to educate it is a dialectic process, internal and external, and this encompasses different ways to human beings depart from what we are and what we want to be. Well, we can deduce that education involves teaching. And it is a whole of we teaching while transmitting sign is only a part. Education is what people synthesize from their set of experience and reflection. The synthesis is to impregnate of meaning, and we do at every moment, and being present and conscious. Based on it, I believe the assumption and definition of the terms music teacher and music educator reveal kind of worldviews. And how do you define yourself while a person who works in education teaching of music? When I asked it, the answers were varied. And 30 subjects, 71.5 of the sample, defined it as music teacher. These seem to be a choice based on the professional habitus of understand of what is to be a teacher, transmitting knowledge and techniques. Well, 28.5 of the sample is 12 subjects identified themselves as music educators. The comprehension of what it is to be an educator was broad and based on different understandings of teaching and education. Where were the differences based on? And here I will present some speech of the subjects. And the first point, the difference among the musical performance conducting, composing course and the teacher training course were presented to base the difference. Let's see. Air music. Professor has a greater musical background than the educator in relation to practical experience. Rita. I do not consider myself a music educator because I did not study in a teacher training course and I do not have sufficient pedagogical knowledge. Luis. I consider myself a teacher because I have no course in education college. That's why I do not consider myself an educator, but rather a music teacher, turned to practice. It's important to notice the subjects are acting in the teaching of music as a supplement to the monthly income. Their professional identity is strong in the musical performance, but there are some conflict over acting as teacher. Well, in such response, we can see the weight of the transmission of a technique knowledge is embedded. It seems to be decontextualized from a conscious and broader formative process. As Bishin argues, it is a mistake to confuse a set of course, the curriculum, with an education. There are those who define themselves as teacher solely by the professional habitus of the transmission of knowledge and by the social capital involved in this profession, and including by the social acceptance of the profession. Uh, in a position, educator is socially quite used for the primary education. Let's see what says Giovanna. People understand me better as a music teacher, and I prefer that term. For me, there is no difference between terms, but people tend to find educator a more appropriate term for a teacher who works with younger children. Such analysis deserve to be made within the use of language in the school field. In Brazil, the terms of division to the school cycles are kindergarten, educação infantil, elementary, ensino fundamental, middle, ensino médio, technical, ensino técnico, and higher education, ensino superior. During early childhood education, the formative process are more holistic and integrated with different perceptions of time, respecting child development in its complexity. By moving to elementary school at age 6, children experience content fragmentation, classroom formatting, compartmentalized time, and separation between who knows and teach what? Well, who knows mathematics, languages, history, geography, science, philosophy, arts, music? Well, this is a daily knowledge about the use of term educação and ensino. Thus, the idea that a teacher works in a more restrictive way is being built. Well, it is based the 30 point, the idea that a teacher works in a restricted way. See, pianist. For me, music educator works with broader concepts in music. The music teacher is more specific. In my case, I work concepts of music applied to the piano repertoire. Branch. I think of the educator as a professional who addresses issues far beyond a major scale in the classroom. Why, teacher? I see myself as simply reproducing a manual tradition. The conceptions of what an educator is and why the subjects define themselves as educators, involving music in its social function, the development of a reflective being, and the full formation of the human being. So, here is the 40 point, a practice beyond the reproduction. See, Isaac. Music teacher is the professional who teaches music for a purpose, whether the student performs at an event, teaching to fulfill content, etc. Educator is the professional that works the musical alphabetization with the interdisciplinary education, providing not only the musical formation, but the development of the musical abilities with social function. And VJ, in my opinion, the term educator is more comprehensive. For me, music and the arts in general is a very valuable medium through which every person can contact oneself. Learning to play an instrument, therefore, is not only about mastering a specific technique, but about getting in touch with our characteristics as human beings, including our fears, our difficulties, and our virtues. The music requires discipline and study, interpersonal skill and rehearsal, a great intellectual effort in the construction of a performance, knowledge of the body, openness to different ideas and opinions, etc. Most of the skills involved in studying music, therefore, can be transposed into any other area of human performance. So, I believe that one's musical development is never unrelated to personal development. For this reason, I believe that the term educator is more proper because I believe that the real learning of music also consists in a full education as a human being. Some of the subjects who thus recognize in themselves as music educator have not had the pretension of acting and teaching when they started the higher education. But teaching in music is an inherent part of the profession and is still largely assumed in practice. Well, not everyone goes into it beyond the income supplement. However, uh, recognizing teaching as a viability of professional achievement or part of a successful career has become increasingly common, as some studies have shown. It seems that in my research, the subjects were developing the experience being educated professionally while educating their students. After all, as completing beings, we are educating one to another. And in teaching process, we teach and learn. Well, my analysis pointed to a difference into the autonomy of performance, accumulation of human and professional capital in the teaching exercise, and a lower index of identity fragmentation in the discourse of those who assume themselves as music educators. Paraphrasing Nicholas Cook, we must all be music educator now? Well, I put this question not in the attempt to defend or condemn the binomials music teacher and music educator, but to advocate for the difference in the etymological constitution of education, educação, uh, and teaching, ensino, and to show how the language mediation can impact the identity formation and demanding a broader look at the subject and the reflection based on the knowledge of experience. Well, to be or not to be beyond Shakespeare is more than a question. It is an infinity that opens. To take education as an assumption process is to consider that education is a process of liberation of man and not a product. Its foundation is the deepening of awareness that operates in man while they work. Above all, the level of awareness through a critical insertion in daily reality cannot be of an individual character, but a social. It must considering education as a power field. Well, so this is what I want to share with you, and I hope you could understand me. And well, it is. Thank you once more. Uh, any question or any appointment, please send me an email, euridiana@gmail.com. And once more, thank you for the opportunity. So enjoy the conference, enjoy London, and